Today, we are talking about your 2026 launch calendar. Now, if you have not already listened to last week's episode on your 2026 marketing strategy, I want you to pause and go back and listen to that first. But if you're all caught up, this is a really important piece of planning our marketing strategy is understanding our campaign and launch calendar. Okay? And when we say launch, I'm not just talking about new offers. This could also be strategic pushes for existing offers. This could be aligning your messaging with what's going on in the market or your ideal client's life and calendar. But before we fill our calendar with posts, we need to know what we're actually leading people towards. Because content doesn't drive your business on its own, but your launch calendar does. And if your marketing plan is the roadmap for your year, the launch calendar is the route your audience travels to get from awareness to purchase. It's where we decide what we're focusing on in terms of what we're selling, when we will sell it, and how we will prepare people to be ready to buy for it. When you map out that first, social media stops being about like, what do I post this week? Email writing stops being about like, well, what should I even say? We stop looking at blank cursors when we want to create content, but we have a strategic and clear plan that leads to conversion, to start a conversation that leads to conversion that's building towards those business goals, right? And this is where planning ahead really, really matters. As you're listening to this, it's mid-December. And maybe you started planning in October, like I did, but then your plan totally changed, which is okay because been there. Maybe you haven't planned yet and you're like, oh, I'm going to do that on Christmas break, that week between Christmas and New Year's when everybody's like eating too much cheese and ready to clean their house and purge everything they own. Like, I'm going to sit down and do my 2026 planning, launch planning then. Okay, that's fine. Maybe you want to wait till January. That's cool too. But I want you to think about the runway we need for campaigns and launches and how important it is to plan ahead so we know where we're going and we create the right route to get there at the right time. Okay. It's not just about like, hey, in January, I want to launch this new offer. Okay. Have I been warming up my audience for this offer? The offer is the solution, right? So we want to make sure that they're solution aware, but are they problem aware? Have we overcome objectives or objections? Have we built trust? Have we nurtured? Maybe I'm even launching an offer that's for a completely new audience. Have I spent time building that audience and nurturing that audience? Do I have intentional storytelling weaved into my content to support the launch plan? It's a lot to think about. And one of the things about launches that I often hear from people is like, well, I'll figure out the content once I'm in launch mode. And this episode is a gentle nudge. Just stop right there. Because the truth is, great content doesn't create your launch plan, it reflects your launch plan. And the earlier you start planning, the calmer and more strategic your launch or campaign will feel. I've had several conversations with potential clients over the last couple of weeks about things that they want to launch in January. And when I ask the question of like, okay, well, we need to get started, they kind of look at me like, well, I thought we would start in January. No, friends. We need at least a 90-day runway for the launch of a new offer. At least, maybe even longer, especially if we are selling to a new audience. We need time to shape the message, test the message, align the messaging, make sure we have a funnel in place, test the sales page, the email automations, the funnels, figure out where we want the customer to go. Maybe we're going to be running ads because we want to build a new audience quickly. So we need to be testing messaging to get the best ROI possible on those ads. And even if we're not going to be running ads and we're not launching a brand new thing, if we're launching or campaigning around something that exists in the world, does that messaging need to be tweaked for what's happening in the market today and with our audience today? So there's a lot of things to think about in terms of campaigns and launches. And so we don't want to build the plane while it's in the air. Yes, that is possible. And I don't want you to think that you can't launch messy because you can. And I'd rather you launch messy than not launch at all because I don't want your great ideas to just sit in a Google Doc and never see the light of day. But I want you to understand that the earlier we start and the earlier we plan, the more effective results you're going to get, the better data you're going to have. And even if the data isn't the numbers you want, it's data that you can learn from so that we can improve and optimize and make it better the next time. So, as you're listening to this in mid-December, if you've got launch plans for Q1, it's time to get started right now. And if you've got launch plans for later in the year, we want to map that year out now so that every month you're not like, well, what's my marketing plan this month? What's my campaign plan? What's my content plan? We already have a framework in place, right? So here's where launch planning fits into your marketing strategy. Within the 5C framework, which is the signature framework we use for our clients, it is the second step, or the campaign calendar, right? This is where we zoom out with a bird's eye view and look at the entire year. And we say, what are our big launches for new offers or existing offers? What seasonal campaigns make sense? Because maybe it's not about an offer, but it's about the messaging around time of year, like holiday or Mother's Day or back to school or whatever it will be. And where will we rest or coast a little bit with some evergreen content? Because we don't want to be launching all the time, right? Knowing that campaign calendar, though, tells you exactly how far ahead planning needs to start and where your capacity boundaries really are. Because the sprint actually happens before the launch. This is something a lot of people miss. Before the public sees a single post, before your cart is open, your sales page is live, there's the pre-launch phase, the behind the scenes strategy and messaging work. You're gathering audience feedback. You're testing ideas in stories. You're having discovery calls to understand what your ideal client even needs. You're brainstorming with ChatGPT. You're watching and understanding and learning what phrases land and letting your audience and your ideal client show you what they care about. Then comes the pre-launch phase, 30 to 60 days where you're building awareness and starting to tell stories that set up the transformation that your offer provides. Now, by the time your official launch week arrives or launch window arrives, you're not surprised, here's something new. You're simply extending an invitation your audience has already been expecting because we've done that pre-launch phase and that pre-launch work. I keep saying launch, but I do want to clarify some language here of a campaign versus a launch. And let's simplify the jargon a little bit. A launch is a concentrated push for one specific offer over a defined window. High energy, high visibility, clear start and end. A campaign is a broader season of messaging, a theme or conversation you lead over several weeks that may include one or more launches. For example, your holiday campaign might include a Black Friday launch. The campaign sets the tone. The launch is the spotlight moment inside of it. And understanding that difference will help you map out the effort and energy necessary for this type of messaging and content rhythm. And when I talk about this content rhythm, I want to talk a little bit about that and understanding capacity. When I relaunched the corner office and our signature offers, I learned this lesson the hard way. I plan to launch in July, right after our podcast relaunch in June. But halfway through June, I realized I did not have the capacity, not mentally, not creatively, not energetically, to produce both at once. So I pushed the agency launch to September. And that one decision changed everything. It gave me time to finalize messaging, prep content, and really, really feel good about what I was putting out into the world and actually enjoy the process instead of just throwing it up and getting it out there to get it out there. And again, I said this earlier, I don't want you to have launches that just live in Google Docs forever because you're afraid that they're not perfect. And I would rather you seriously launch messy than not launch at all. But I also want you to understand how important it is to give yourself the time to prep the content, to massage the messaging, to figure out what your audience needs to hear when you are launching something new or when you're trying to level up something that you've launched in the past. For most service-based businesses, here's the cadence that I would recommend. A big launch once per quarter is plenty. Product-based brands might launch more often, but even they need buffer time to recover. And here's the truth. Launching takes energy from you and your audience. If you launch back to back without breathing room, everyone gets tired. Use the off weeks for evergreen campaigns where we're doing more nurture content. We're sharing testimonials, education, behind the scenes. It's a quieter rhythm that keeps relationships warm without the constant selling push. Now, how does launch planning shape your social media? Well, your social calendar should follow your launch plan, not lead it. So when you know what's coming, your content goals get clearer. Pre-launch, you're gathering insight, you're testing ideas, you're listening to your audience, you're trying to create more engagement. Pre-launch, you're sharing value, you're telling stories, you're hinting at transformations possible, you're overcoming objections softly. And then in that launch window, we're really focused on visibility, social proof, urgency, engagement, and selling. And post-launch, we can breathe, we can celebrate, we can reflect, we can maybe share wins, but mostly we can rest for a little bit. Without this plan, you end up creating disconnected content that feels busy but not strategic. And planning gives your creativity some purpose. If you've outsourced social media, whether it's to your own team or an agency, they have got to be looped in early. They need to understand before they even begin to draft content or think about your content calendar and strategy, especially with a new offer. What is the offer and its promise? What problem does it solve? What is the transformation that it delivers? What are some key objections and frequently asked questions? Because when your strategist knows this, they can build content that warms leads naturally. Otherwise, they're guessing, and guessing leads to generic content. So this is actually one of the things that I love to do inside the corner office with our clients. We go through the cornerstone strategy process first. So when launch season comes, everything from captions to reels to carousels connects back to those larger business goals. And we understand the messaging of not just the brand, but that specific offer. But just like your audience needs breathing room between offers, remember that you do need recovery time between launches. After a launch, schedule a pause in new content creation. Maybe repurpose some best performing content that you've shared before. Share some community highlights. Let your energy and your analytics catch their breath. A rested founder creates better strategy. And by making sure you're not going pedal to the metal, you'll actually have time to sit back and reflect so that we can optimize. And then next time we launch, we learn and get even better. Planning ahead does not box you in. It buys you freedom. Freedom to create intentionally, to show up calmly, and to actually enjoy your business. So as you plan your 2026 campaign calendar, I want you to ask yourself, what offers am I launching? What does my audience need in order to warm up to some of these offers if they're new? Where can I rest between launches so I don't burn out? And if you want to figure out well, what should my launch versus evergreen mix look like? Those are things we talk about in our strategy sessions and in our cornerstone strategy intensives when you work with the corner office. So I'd love to partner with you and help you map that rhythm. I would love to be that partner who sees the big picture and helps you handle some of the day-to-day with the content, because that's exactly what we do inside the corner office. You grab our service guide in the show notes to learn more about the retainers that we offer, and it'll walk you through more details around that 5C framework and how we plan, manage, and execute your marketing so your next launch feels organized, not overwhelming. Because when your content, your calendar, and your capacity are aligned, consistency stops feeling like a grind and it starts to feel like confidence. Here's to your next well-planned launch, a 2026 launch calendar full of wins, and the calm that comes from being ready long before it begins. Thanks so much for being here, my friend. I can't wait to see you in our next episode. And send me a DM over on Instagram if you have questions about launch calendar planning. This is like my jam. I love talking about this stuff. So I'm happy to voice message a little bit, chat in the DMs, and come up with a launch calendar for you.